All right, Jed, ready?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Let's get this show on the road as we talk Georgia football. It's nice to talk. I've had you're the third, and hopefully this will be the beginning of a beautiful, long-lasting relationship. You are the third of three Augasports.com analysts that I've been able to talk to over the last 3 or 4 years. And I've heard that you're right now the top guy because you're there on scene. You're there at practice. You know what's going on. You've got the recruiting, title as well for
Mhm.
Augasports.com. So is that true? Are you the man?
I am a man.
You're
I don't
a
know about
man.
the man, but yeah, it's we've had let's see, it's been about 2 weeks, 2 weeks tomorrow, I guess, since practice started going. So
You're there every
yeah,
day.
it's been fun.
That must be fun.
Yeah, we get it's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday is what the fall camp schedule's
Okay.
been as far as team stuff goes.
Okay.
So yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, it must be. Now, where did you go to school?
So I went to school, I went to high school at Madison County High School. It's like 20 minutes east of Athens.
Okay.
So graduated from there in 2015, went to Georgia, graduated journalism,
Awesome.
2019, and here we are.
That's awesome. Yeah. I just can't imagine if I'd had that opportunity. So good luck. Good start. All right. Let's talk about this national championship team, this defending national championship team. And we'll start because I guess if you had to put like a headline on what would be like the biggest story for Georgia in the offseason, what would it be? I mean, last year's team and this year's team.
In the offseason, I think you just got to look at that defense, right? Because you lose, I mean, they had 5 first-round draft picks. They had, I think, 10 or 11 players off the defense get drafted. I mean, it's just how do you replace a group that not only you lost a bunch of seniors, but seniors that produced one of the best defenses we've seen in college football this century. So I think a thing that's unique about this defense, one, there's a ton of talent. When you recruit as well as Georgia does, there's going to be talent everywhere. But there's not a lot of like in-game experience. And I think unique in this case, when you've got a team coming off national championship, there can be complacency worries. There can be, oh, we won a title. What do we need to do? But all these guys, especially on defense, a lot of these guys weren't the stars last year. Like you take a guy like Zion Logue on the defensive line. He played, he was a rotational piece, but he's overshadowed by the Jordan Davises and Devontae Wyatt's,
Sure.
right? So Zion Logue says, hey, this is my year to step up and show I can be the guy. At inside linebacker, there's Jamal Dumas Johnson, Smile Mondon saying, this is my turn to be the guy. You got guys in the secondary. You got guys on the edge. You got offensive guys at left and right guard battles stepping up. So it's very unique that you've got. I mean, Kirby Smart said this the other day. He was like, I'm not worried about. I have been on title teams when you talk about Kirby Smart being in Alabama, where I've been worried about complacency, but he said he's not worried about it this year. And I guess with all the guys I lost, it makes sense.
And I was looking. Actually, we did an SEC preview last week, I believe, with one of my partners here, Mark Lawrence, who actually puts this out. It's the playbook guide that comes out for NFL. It's a 30th anniversary issue for both the NFL and college football. And we were talking about Georgia, and he mentioned, which was in this guide, he mentioned about how how Kirby actually found a playing experience for, I believe it was up to 49% of their 330 overall team starts. So a lot of underclassmen were able to get playing time. How much of that playing time was either in big games or in big spots, or would you say actually led to you going, hey, you know what? Here are some guys that showed with their time last season that they could actually make an impact this year.
Yeah, there were a few guys. I mentioned Jamal Dumas Johnson. He played a lot at inside linebacker and mop up duty, and he showed flashes. He had, I want to say, he had a sack against Georgia Tech. He returned an interception for a touchdown against, I believe, it was UAB. But a lot of these guys contributed on special teams, kickoff coverage, punt return, punt coverage, stuff like that. And that's where Kirby has said, when you get into this program, that's where you have to prove you can contribute before you get on the field. So a lot of those guys, like you said, played on special teams, played in mop-up time, and even some of them, like I mentioned, Zion Logue, he rotated in in a regular defensive line rotation, but he wasn't necessarily counted on to play as many snaps as a Devontae Wyatt or Jordan Davis. So those guys have experience, but not the I wouldn't say starting experience. Like, it's kind of hard to say starting because they rotate guys in
because
and
just
out so
because
much
they
anyway. But
start doesn't mean that they actually
right,
get a lot of playing
exactly.
time.
But they don't have necessarily, I would say, first top tier experience necessarily.
Yeah, and that's important. That's the difference between stats and what's actually going on. That's why you're there. You see every game, you see every snap, so you know what's actually happening, which is why we have top analysts like you guys on. So, all right, well, I tell you what, let's get right into it and talk about the quarterback position, which is not going to be a problem as long as Stetson Bennett remains healthy. So we already know that. So let's talk about the future, or if there is an injury to Stetson Bennett. Is there a definite next guy up when you talk about these top recruits? Beck, Vandegrift, and of course Gunnar Stockton.
Mm-hmm.
From what you've seen or heard, any of those kids have a leg up on the other as far as the future starting in 2023?
I think Beck probably does, just because, one, he's been in Athens the longest one. Two, he's a little more of a I guess pro style passer, at least coming out of high school. Maybe Vandegrift and Stockton, those guys ran a little bit more in high school, which is great. Those are good skill sets to have. But the transition to college for those guys is taking a little bit more time. I think next year you can maybe see like Vandegrift and Stockton will challenge for the starting job. Don't get me wrong, and it very easily one of them could win it. But I had to pick today. I would say Beck. Beck is, for all indications, appear to be he's the number 2 guy. Right now, if Stetson Bennett goes down, it's going to be Carson Beck that comes in, I think. But then the question is, it's modern college football. So next spring, we're going to have an open quarterback competition, I would assume. And then
whoever loses,
say Carson Beck wins it, who would do? I mean, I would assume one of them, Brock or Stockton leaves. Maybe 2 of them could leave. And that leaves you with, in Georgia's 2023 recruiting class, they missed on Arch Manning, so they don't have a quarterback in the recruiting class. And that leaves, do they go to the transfer portal or bring a guy in? There's a lot of dominoes that could take place after the season. But as of right now, like you mentioned, Stetson Bennett's the starter, and that conversation pretty much begins and ends there.
All right. Now, at running back, this is where things start to get interesting on offense. White's gone, of course. Cook is gone.
Mm-hmm.
There are players back, McIntosh, Milton, and Edwards. McIntosh seems to have he's the guy that people seem to, at least from the outside, he's the next guy. Would you say that's the truth? Is he more, who out of the 3, unless I'm missing somebody else, and I know returning wise, those are the top 3, but who would be the one that may be the best true, like, number 1 running back? Not all around, but somebody that could actually be, because I look at White as more of like a number 1 running back, and Cook was the all-around guy. So let's say this season, who would you consider like the White guy and the Cook guy?
I would say the Cook guy is more Kenny McIntosh, because he's shown ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. And that's something, Todd Monken said, hey, we're going to need Kenny to pick up that slack, because now that Cook's gone.
Okay.
Last year we had 2 guys. Now it's Kenny that's got most of that experience. Kendall Milton, I think, is the Zamir White kind of between the tackles bruiser type. It's not a problem with him, but he's battled injuries a lot throughout his career. I think in camp right now he's dealing with a little bit of a hamstring thing, which isn't super long term, but it's another one of those things where you lose more reps. So I think a guy to watch might be Dejean Edwards, because he's a guy that has been kind of the garbage time back in recent years. But like when he gets in, he's averaged, I think, 5 yards, maybe a little over 5 yards carry.
Okay.
So now that he's in line for a bigger role, what does he look like? And then you've got 2 freshmen, Branson Robinson and Andrew Paul, who look, both those guys are just like specimens, right? When you just look at them. So the thing is, running back is a position where you get a lot of injuries, right? So that's 5 guys. You're likely going to need all of them at some point this year. So the question is, if Milton goes down or Edwards goes down, does one of those freshmen come in and take their spot? You think of 2014, if we're going to go way back, when Todd Gurley gets suspended for NCAA whatever violations. Nick Chubb comes in and is just a revelation all of a sudden. So they've got, it's kind of like other positions. They've got talent there, but none of those guys has been the true workhorse during their time in Athens. So we'll see how that goes.
So you mentioned the two true freshmen. Who do you kind of see a separation there at all? Is it one guy seem to have a little bit more of a ceiling, or is it way too early to tell?
Well, the interesting thing is Branson Robinson was, I mean, at least on Rivals, he was the number one guy in the class. He's got, he's gone viral for having these just crazy looking pictures, or he's just a stud. But then we've seen Andrew Paul in scrimmages. Andrew Paul out of Texas is just as physically imposing a guy as Branson Robinson. So I think both of those guys, as of now, are the more, like you were talking about earlier, more of a Zamir White between the tackles bruiser type.
Okay.
That's something they're going to have to work on, both picking like pass protection and being able to run routes out of the backfield. But yeah, I mean, those guys just absolutely look the part for sure. So I wouldn't be surprised to see one or both of them work their way into at least a partial rotation role throughout the season, especially depending on how injuries go and everything.
Okay. Let's talk about. Well, we'll start at the receiver spot, actually, at tight end, because I don't think I've ever seen a team have this much talent with their top three. Their top, you can go top two, top three. I mean, it's just amazing, especially the top two. We all know how good Brock Bowers is. First of all, do you think Bowers, if he has another really good season, which we anticipate he will, do you expect Bowers to leave?
Well, he's only a true sophomore, so he's stuck here for 2 more years. But I don't. I mean, I think if he was in this April's draft, I mean, he would have been one. He would have been a first round pick. I mean, the guy's just, which is crazy because he didn't come out of. I mean, he was a good recruit, but he didn't come out of high school with these just phenomenal. Which, being from California, Northern California, not a super football hotbed. Two, he didn't have a senior season due to COVID, so that kind of tamped down the hype a little bit. But I mean, game one, the first play of the season is a pass to Bowers, and he was kind of off from there. So. I think it's hard to say benefited from injuries, but when you had Arik Gilbert away from the team last year, you got Darnell Washington dealing with a foot injury, all of a sudden it's up to Brock Bowers to seize the opportunity, and he did. He had one of the best pass catching seasons of Georgia receiver what tight ends ever had. And so, I mean, the question is, what does he do for an encore? And he's got Washington's healthy, Gilbert's healthy, you got Oscar Delp as a freshman, you've got that room so deep. It's crazy, but definitely they got Brock Bowers at the head of the group.
Yeah, and I would think his numbers, you got to believe they're going to go down a little bit with Gilbert coming into the picture, and that's really the big question: is whether Gilbert does become a full-time contributor. So there's been a lot of questions about Gilbert, especially with him not playing last year. So what's the deal there? What's personally what's going on within Gilbert's life?
Yeah, he stepped away from the team. I believe it was about a couple weeks before the season last year. If I remember, it was definitely into fall camp. He just had some personal issues going on, and the team, like I said, all through camp, we support him. We've got his back, and he's been back with the team since January. He's been going through conditioning. He is in much better shape now than he was when he got to Athens last fall. He played great in the spring game this year, kind of like I just said with Bowers, because Bowers and Washington missed the spring with injuries. So he plays in G-Day. He catches, I think, 2 touchdowns and looks great. So he's got to maintain conditioning and all those kinds of things. But if you add him to the mix, it's just, you could. He's kind of like Bowers in the sense that he skews a little more toward a receiver tight end hybrids. You can, just think you could have Bowers and Washington lined up at tight end and Gilbert split out, or you could split Bowers out and put Gilbert on the end of the line. Like, there's so many possibilities if all those guys stay healthy and do what they're supposed to do. But you add Gilbert to the mix with Bowers and Washington, 2 huge matchup nightmares, and it's just silly.
So, but we don't know then exactly what the problem was. We just know it was a personal matter, and it's now over. As far as
it's over, he's back. He's been back since January. No other, issues on that front have surfaced, and by all accounts, he's been doing great. He's doing great in the classroom, all those kinds of things, and he's here, and we'll see how much of an on-field factor he turns out to be this fall.
What do you notice the differences between those two guys, Bowers and Gilbert?
I think Gilbert is a little more of a polished route runner.
Okay.
Because, like I said, he skews a little more toward. I think when he reported to Georgia, or when he transferred to Georgia last year, the rumor was they were going to slim him up and play him as a receiver. So I think Bowers is a guy that when he gets the ball in his hands, he just explodes. He gets upfield, will run over you, will break tackles, will run away from you, whatever. I think Gilbert is a little more um, crafty in his route running, polished in his route running, gets open, those kind of things. But definitely too, I mean, the Bowers obviously, but I think Gilbert has All-American potential too. The thing is, do either one of them, and this goes for Washington too, do they put up the numbers to be All-Americans just from all the quality targets they can spread the ball around to?
And maybe not the biggest deal in the world,
No,
especially
no,
once they get to the next level, because they're both going to
exactly.
end up being first-round draft picks whenever they decide to
Yeah.
come out. They're that good. Okay, wide receiver, the loss of Pickens is pretty big. Even though he was injured most of the year last year, they still went on to win the championship. Jermaine Burton, what was the deal with Burton transferring to Alabama? What did that come about?
Well, you can't say it's because he wanted to win a championship, I guess. I mean, I think when you're a receiver and you look at Alabama and what they've done with Jameson Williams, Devontae Smith, all these guys that have posted huge numbers, that's got to be attractive to a receiver. I mean, it is what it is. Georgia's had one 1,000-yard receiver
Okay.
in school history.
Okay.
Alabama had, what, 2 last year,
Sure.
maybe? They've had 10 in the past, 8 years, whatever. Like, it's hard to not want to play in that offense if you're a receiver. There's
Makes
some
sense.
Georgia fans that are pretty upset about it because you win a championship with one team and you go to the biggest
Yeah.
obstacle to winning a championship in their own conference. So, but at the end of the day, he did what he felt was best for him. And if he goes to Alabama and puts up 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns and is a first round draft pick, then he accomplished what he set out to do. He's another guy that is he's been dinged up about his career, so he's got to stay healthy as well. But if the goal is to be a first round draft pick, you certainly can't argue with Alabama's track record of doing that.
Okay, now the rest of the receiver room, the guys that are coming back, we know McConkey. Mitchell was pretty on par with McConkey as far as the numbers were concerned. Let's start there with those two guys. Who would you consider to be like if there was a pecking order between the two?
I think, if you're going to list the receiver depth chart 1 to 10, I think Mitchell would probably be 1.
Okay.
I think McConkey is more of the take the top off the defense kind of guy. Just he's got blazing speed. Mitchell has good speed as well, but he's more of the route runner, get open, strong hands, catches along the sidelines. Kind of a little bit more of a closer to a Pickens type, I would say, than McConkey.
Okay.
But yeah, honestly, those guys could be 1A and 1B even. They're right there. The staff just trusts those guys immensely and with good reason. Mitchell was a true freshman last year. McConkey was a redshirt freshman. Yeah. And when Pickens goes down, it's kind of like, okay, it's up to you guys now. And they pretty much from the jump, kind of like Bowers, were just like, okay, put it on our shoulders and let's go. And they obviously turned out to be pretty great. Mitchell made one of the biggest catches in Georgia history there in the national championship. So hard to argue with that.
Kyrus Jackson. So number 1 receiver in 2020. As his stats, I guess, came down a little bit last year. Why was that? What was going on with Kyrus Jackson?
Kyrus Jackson, that guy, first of all, it seems like he's been in Athens for about 10 years since I was in high school, it seems like. He's a guy that he's battled some injuries too. I think 2020, it seemed like he had a really strong rapport with JT Daniels when he came on the scene. Same with Jermaine Burton. And that's not a knock on Stetson Bennett. It is what it is, And I remember back in 2016 when Jacob Eason was the quarterback, he had a thing with Riley Ridley and Isaac Nada, and then Jake Fromm takes over, and all of a sudden it's Javon Wims and Terry Godwin getting all the work. So it's just one of those things. He's such a dependable guy. He's a good blocker, which is something that this offense and Kirby Smart values very highly. He's just a steady presence. He's going to be probably the leading candidate to return punts as well.
Okay.
So he's just a steady guy. He's a great leader. He's on all kind of like leadership committees and stuff. And Athens, it was just a great leader and a very steady presence in that receiver room too.
All right, and then the other some of the other younger players. What's the deal with this? I got to know what's up with Arian Smith. I've never seen anything like this. 5 receptions, 188 yards. This is his career. 188, 3 touchdowns. That's a 37.6 yard average.
Yeah,
so
strong.
Is that a fluke? Or I don't know how it can be, but is that a fluke? And if not, is this like a kid that we need to definitely keep an eye on?
Well, he would have been a guy you need to keep an eye on. Unfortunately, he suffered a really sounds like a nasty high ankle sprain type thing in camp. He's going to have surgery. Doesn't sound particularly promising that he'll be back in the regular season. They haven't ruled it out yet, but
Okay.
I mean the kid has just had just brutal injury luck. I mean, he was a track guy in high school. He was running track at Georgia. He's had a hairline fracture in his leg. He came back too soon. He broke it all the way. Um, he's had there's another maybe an ankle or something in there, and then this year he gave up track in the spring to focus on football and getting healthy and getting in good shape. And he's a guy like McConkey. He's got blazing speed. Like you mentioned those stats. He's averaging 40 yards a catch or whatever. Like so when he's on the field, the defense has to account for him, and it really stinks for the kid and to be out for another year. It looks like, and I guess he could end up doing a Pickens type situation where he comes back at the very end of the year and can help in the playoffs. But it's a really, and it's not even a. I mean, from what we've heard, it was a fluke thing in practice. He kind of got rolled up on or something, and just a freak thing that happened to a guy who has a lot of freak things happen to him. So that really kind of stinks for him.
But that doesn't mean his career's over by a wide
No.
margin.
No.
So he's definitely someone we'll keep out next year. So
yeah, for sure.
Okay. And then Blaylock. So speaking of injuries, so he hasn't really played much at all the last couple of years, has he?
No, so a freshman in 19, had a great year, kind of like A.D. Mitchell. He burst on the scene. Remember, he caught a long touchdown against Auburn. He tore his ACL in the SEC championship. And then he tore it again in fall camp before 2020. So last year was kind of like he wasn't cleared, and then he was cleared, but he still wasn't playing. And it seemed like the whole thing was, okay, medically he's cleared, but he's got to get confidence in the knee, right? Because you've had 2 ACLs, like that's gonna screw with your mind a little bit. So he played a little more towards the end of the year. I don't know exactly. He didn't catch a ton of passes. But so this year it's one of those things where, okay, you win the national championship last year with Mitchell, McConkey, and Pickens. Now, if you can get Blaylock back and contributing some, that's just a huge. He's more of a slot guy, I think, than maybe an outside guy, and he's a guy that could return punts as well. I don't know that they'd put him back there just with the injury history, but that'd be a huge add if they can get him back and healthy and confident. I think is the most important thing with him.
And of course Jackson. So yeah, that's still looking like a good room. Is there someone else I am missing from the wide receiver room that we should be keeping an eye on?
So 2 guys. There's Jackson Meeks, who is I want to say a redshirt freshman, a huge, big, imposing guy.
Okay.
He's been moved up in the receiver rotation this fall, just with some guys that are gone. He's a guy that can make an impact. And then as far as freshmen go, there's Dylan Bell out of Houston. Very versatile guy. He played quarterback in high school, like a wildcat quarterback type. Kids, like I saw him at practice the other day, and I literally said out loud, "Who is that guy?" Because he's huge. He looks great. We've heard a lot about him in fall camp. We've even heard Kirby praise him over the PA system at practice a couple times, telling him nice catch or good explosion or whatever. So he's a guy to look out for. I guess probably especially later in the season once he gets his feet wet a little bit.
All right. So Meeks and Bell, those are a couple of guys we definitely need to keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm.
Offensive line. Now, Sawyer and Schaefer are gone. Broderick Jones is back. He was able to get some starts at left tackle last year, so that's good.
Mm-hmm.
So is he the most talented lineman returning? Like with the biggest upside?
I think so. I mean, he went in the national championship last year and just held his own, not even really expecting to play, and played well that game. So he's got a ton of ups. I mean, good year this year. I could see him being, elevating into a first round draft pick. He's that good. He's tall. He's long. He's got good athleticism. Yeah, he's a very, very, very good. I think he needs to work on maybe like leadership stuff, like intangible type things.
Okay.
But as far as physical gifts, I mean, you don't get any more gifted than that kid.
And what else should we? Is this a concern with the offense? Is this the one where there's a little bit more questions? There's not as many top players or top talents that will be lining up this year, or are there some players that we need to keep an eye on that will just end up being future star players?
Yeah, I wouldn't say concern. I just think questions because there's so much back on offense. Because you got McClendon at right tackle back, you got Van Perren at center. So the battles have been at left and right guard. Um, right guard, Tate Ratledge is kind of the X factor because he started the year at right guard last year against Clemson, and then like the fourth play of the game, he suffers a Liz Frank injury in his foot, is out for the year. So he's back. He's been repping with the ones. As long as that foot holds up, I think he'll be the starter at right guard. Left guard, there's a battle there. I think the inside track to start right now is Devin Willock, who's like 6'7", 335 or something out of New Jersey.
Okay.
Just, your typical road grader guard you get in the SEC, right? But then behind them, I mean, there's so many guys that have battled for that guard spot. There's Warren Erickson, who played at guard mostly last year, Jared Wilson, Micah Morris, Austin Blasky, Xavier Truss, who started his career at tackle. There's just a ton of guys battling, which is great because there's plenty of depth there, right? If one of those, say this was last year and Ratledge goes down and misses the whole season, there's a ton of guys the staff feels confident in to slide right in. Plus, you've got Amarius Mims, who's a very talented guy. He's been mainly repping at tackle, but could probably kick down the guard if needed as well. So there's plenty of depth there. Okay. It's just a matter of finding that combination of guys that works best. But right now, I think it's going to be Ratledge at right guard and Willick at left.
Okay. But Jones, at this point in time, would be like the only blue chip prospect to keep an eye on in the next couple of years as far as the draft was concerned, like as a top pick.
Yeah, probably. I think Warren McClendon's a very good college tackle. I don't know that the NFL scouts will necessarily see him that way. I could be wrong, being that I'm not an NFL scout, but yeah, because Broderick Jones is that stereotypical, big, tall left tackle.
Yes.
So we'll see how he turns. I think McClendon could be second, third round, maybe, just depending on. I mean, he's obviously played very well in college.
Nothing wrong with that.
But we'll see.
Okay, now on defense, you have Lanning gone, the coordinator, who actually. How big? Let's start with Lanning. How big of a loss is Lanning recruiting wise?
Recruiting wise, I mean, it's a loss. I mean, he's a younger guy. Well, the thing is, he's always a younger guy, right? And he obviously relates to guys. But as far as outside linebackers, they replaced him with Chidera Uzodiribe, who is, I mean, the dude's not even 30 yet. I mean, he relates to these kids so well. They talk about music, shoes, TV shows. I mean, he checks up on them all the time. And then, defense, as far as the defensive coordinator, I mean, it's as far as that goes, I mean, you've got Kirby Smart on staff. You've got Muschamp. So I don't think as a defensive coordinator is necessarily a huge loss. And then from an outside linebackers perspective, yeah, it's a loss, but they replaced him with a great guy in Chidera Uzodiribe that, I mean, he hit the ground running. He's building a strong edge class in 23. So it's a loss. I mean, there's staff turnover and there's the board changes and all that kind of stuff when you change coaches. But Uzodiribe is doing a great job by all accounts.
All right, let's start up front, and everybody's gone. Not that there's a whole lot of everybody's, but there's three big players gone. 3 first-round draft picks. So when you lose three first-round draft picks on your three-man front, that is going to be a big blow, including the number 1 overall pick. Jalen Carter seems to be the big name that comes back. Second-team SEC, led the team in tackles for loss. What kind of talent ceiling does Carter have as far as the next level? And Michael Williams is the top recruit, true freshman. So give me some names. What's the next wave of players that could be the next group of, potential first-round draft picks?
Jalen Carter's
including if Carter's that guy.
Yeah, Jalen Carter's that guy. I mean, he could parlay himself into a top 10, top defensive tackle off the board. I mean, he's got that kind of explosion, strength. I mean, you watched Georgia games last year, and like you said, you're watching the Jordan Davises and Trayvon Walkers, and then oh, who tackled that guy in the backfield? Oh, it's 88. Jalen Carter slinging this guy for a 3-yard loss. I mean, he's just – now the question is this year, is he able to sustain that kind of production when he's the guy and he has –
True.
Doesn't have Davis and Wyatt next to him. And it's like – not to say that Logan and, Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, these guys aren't great players. It's just we don't know right now. We know Jalen Carter is pretty much a known. These other guys, not so much. So – Jalen Carter's a freak. You look at Michael Williams. Let's go to Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins. He's a guy that can maybe fill that Trayvon Walker mold a little bit. Big guy that could stand up, could put his hand in the dirt. I mentioned Zion Logue earlier. Here's guys like Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson, that are maybe more of those 3 tech, not over the center types.
Sure.
And then, yeah, you've got Mykel Williams, who that's the guy that I think is really going to move up in the rotation. Him and Marvin Jones. I think Mykel is a little bit more of a Trayvon Walker type. He's big. Like I said, I think they're seeing him more as a hand in the dirt guy right now.
Who is that?
Mykel Williams.
Oh, Mykel Williams. Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, during his recruitment process, he told me 1,000 times, like, yeah, the staff compares me to Trayvon. So at the time, you're like, oh, wow. And then now in hindsight, being a first round pick and everything, it's like, oh, that's really impressive. So
absolutely.
But yeah, then that's the defensive line is kind of the question mark, right? Because what Georgia's done against the run, especially the past couple of years, has been just epic. So how do you replace those guys? I guess we'll see in a couple of weeks.
All right. So you're going to put Mykel Williams, though, at the top as far as potential next wave guy. And Marvin Jones is also someone to keep an eye on then.
On that front, yeah, for sure.
On that front. Okay. Linebackers. So Dean's gone. Walker's gone. Tyndall's gone. So, again, more talent out the window. Nolan Smith and Beale. So those are the top guys that are returning. And let's see. You still there, Jed?
Ah, there you go. I got you back now.
That's okay. As long as you're still back. Okay, so Nolan Smith, Robert Beale, those are the two named experienced players that are back. Talk about Smith, because watching him in 2020, even though statistically he didn't have this huge season last season, I guess, did I lose? Is Jed gone? I guess I lost Jed. I guess am I gonna have to edit this again? Okay, it's editing time. All right, let's see. There's Jed. Say goodbye to Jed. And say hello to Jed.
You got me? Hey, I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, that was weird. I didn't see anything on my end, but...
Yeah, I didn't either.
You're okay? You're back?
Love technology, I guess.
I know, whatever. It is what it is. We deal with
I
it,
heard
but it works.
Linebackers was the last thing I heard.
Yeah, well, we were talking about... So Nolan Smith. I'm watching him play in 2020, and I'm saying, man, this guy just looks like, even though there's so many other talented players in this defense, he just stuck out to me. Didn't have the stats or maybe the big plays last year that he did the year before, but now he's back. So compare Smith to some of the other players, including Dean and Tyndall, just from last year, because I believe he has a higher ceiling. I believe because of his size, I think he has the ceiling to be drafted earlier than Dean and be maybe even a more impact player at the next level. Am I wrong?
I don't think so. I think Nolan definitely has high ceiling, as you plug him in as a 3-4 outside linebacker, which is pretty much what he plays in Athens, and you go from there. He doesn't have. I think last year was definitely the year where you saw that potential. I had him as a 5-star recruit or whatever coming out of high school. He had a lot of. The game was pretty much over, but he had the sack on the last play of the national championship, which is what he'll be remembered forever for by Georgia fans. But for one, having him back as a leadership standpoint in that defense is huge, especially in the front seven. But yeah, he's got. I think if he was a little, longer, that would help him as far as the next level. I think he's a type of player that's like, he's not freaky athletic or explosive necessarily. He's just a good, solid rusher. He's good. He's good at everything. Okay. He's not like a freak athlete or freakishly strong, but he's a good, solid player. And if he parlays that into better production this year, then I think he's got pretty good, pretty high draft.
Is he a better edge rusher or cover linebacker?
I would say edge rusher, probably. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Now, Robert Beale led the team. I don't think anybody would have picked Robert Beale leading the team with 6.5 sacks. So what's up with this kid leading the team with 6.5 sacks? Is that just because he took advantage of all the other talent around him? What kind of a player is Beale?
So Beale is kind of like Nolan Smith. Actually, I think he's a little stronger than Smith. He skews, not that he plays there a lot, but he's more of a guy that could play with his hand in the dirt a little bit. Adam Anderson was on track to lead the team in sacks, and he had his legal issues and was kicked off the team. So, but yeah, Smith and Beale are just two solid guys on the edge. Now the question is, where do you go behind them? Because you've got a bunch like Chaz Chambliss is a guy we've heard a lot. doesn't have a lot of early reps, the early big time game reps.
Sure.
MJ Sherman is a guy you see him at practice and he looks like he's huge. He looks great. Does he step up after being a huge recruit? And then, like I said, you've got Marvin Jones as a freshman. You've got Darius Smith and CJ Madden as freshmen that I think might use this year to further develop and be those guys in 2023. So that's kind of the question is, okay, you got Smith and Beale as your top two. That's a great top two, but who emerges as those guys, those rotation pieces behind them?
Is there, especially inside, is there like if you had to pick one
Yeah.
guy?
So inside linebackers, you've got Jamal Dumas Johnson, who flashed some last year. You've got Smile Mondon, who Kirby Smart called Smile Mondon one of the best athletes he's ever seen in his coaching career.
Okay.
You've got Kirby, who's been doing this for 25 years, and with the guys he's coached, that catches your eye when he says that. So I think those two are probably going to be your top two guys when the season kicks off against Oregon. You've also got Tresman Marshall and Ryan Davis, who are older guys that have been injured. Both have been injured throughout their whole careers, it seems like, but they're good players when they're healthy. And then you've got a freshman in Jalen Walker, who's a very good player. He, in camp, has been used a little bit in a Tyndall-esque role. He has been slid down and been an edge rusher at points. So he could be a guy that works his way into like a situational type role and things like that.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I think it's going to be, if I had to pick a top three, because they rotated, it was three guys pretty much last year, I'd probably say Dumas Johnson, Smile Mondon, and Tresman Marshall, assuming he's healthy.
All right. Now let's talk about that secondary, which was big statistically last year. I think they were right up there as one of the best in all of the nation. And I mean, the defense was really the best in all of the nation, but the secondary was just as good, even though it didn't produce like any of the top names like the front seven did. But still, a couple of guys gone. Kendrick's gone. Seen's gone. But Ringo's back and Chris Smith are back. So two guys are back. Ringo, how does he compare to some of the other really good Georgia corners that have come around in recent years? On average, late first round guy, or better than even those guys? He could be a top 10 pick.
Yeah, I definitely think he's got, I'd say probably mid first round upside. I mean, he's big. I mean, he's just a big physical dude. And he's got the speed to match. So, I mean, he's built like almost a safety or something. I mean, but obviously with cornerback coverage skills. So he's got huge upside. I mean, last year, it's crazy because everyone remembers him now for the
interception
pick six in the national championship. Yeah, but I mean, the season opener against Clemson.
Oh yeah,
they throw him in and he gets a couple. I mean, gets a couple pass interferences, and everyone's like, "Oh man, what's the deal with Ringo? Like, what's his story? He's getting all these flags, and then he's a hero later."
Yeah.
So now the question is, he's got to be a leader. Let's say he's a very quiet guy, so he's got to be a little more of a vocal leader in the secondary back there. But he's got all the talent in the world, man.
And then Smith, also a big player to have back, fourth team SEC. So would he be the leader of the secondary?
Definitely, yeah, because he's a guy, I want to say he's in his fifth, maybe even sixth year, maybe just with COVID and everything. I mean, he's getting him back is huge because, I mean, losing Lewis Seen, who was probably the quarterback of at least the secondary, they were facing the prospect of replacing him and Smith. And now you get Smith back. You've got the signal caller in the secondary, which is absolutely just, I mean, that might have been the biggest recruiting win of the 22 class is getting him back. And just to have to plug him back there in the secondary. Because then at the other safety, you've got Dan Jackson as an option. You've got Javon. So Georgia plays a star, which is kind of like a nickel-ish type. And they kind of cross-train guys between nickel and stars. So you've got Javon Bullard, Dan Jackson, Tyke Smith, who missed most of last year after transferring from West Virginia. If you want a guy to watch in the secondary, watch Malachi Stark. He's a freshman from Jefferson High School, probably 30 minutes from Athens. He's been rotating in with the ones at star and safety in the spring. Just freak athlete, great kid. I think he has a ways to go in terms of learning, not the playbook, but like schematically what to do, staying in your zones and passing off coverages, that kind of thing. But he's got all the tools in the world. And by the end of the year, I wouldn't be shocked if he's a starter. And then you look at the other corner. I think Kamari Lassiter's got the leg up for the other corner spot. Nyland Green's battling there, and freshman Dalen Everett is also battling there because he was here in the spring and got spring practice reps. But yeah, you look at Ringo and Smith are kind of the known secured spots back there in the secondary, and then everything else is kind of shaking itself out during camp.
Is Tyke Smith healthy? No lingering issues.
It seems like he's healthy, yeah. But the thing is, I don't. He's not. He's definitely not. You know, slotted in for a starting spot. He's got to earn it. I don't. He's one of those guys, kind of all sorted into the mix, battling. I think he'll play. He'll play. William Poole is another guy. I forgot he played in the national championship and played well. But yeah, he's going to have to earn it. He's a guy that he transferred in last year. When you transfer somewhere, you kind of think you're going to end up getting playing time, but he's going to have to earn it. He's going to have to earn it for sure.
Especially when he transferred to Georgia.
Yeah, exactly.
Special teams. So place kicker returns. Punter must be replaced.
Mm-hmm.
Confident that the kicker can make a big kick. And how's the punting situation?
Yeah, Jack Podlesny comes back. He obviously kind of burst on the scene when he made the field goal to beat Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl a couple years ago. He's had his moments where he's been a slightly sporadic. I think what this staff honestly would really love is if to say, okay, from 50 yards and in, be consistent, hit 90, 95% of your kicks, whatever. Punter, I mean, Jake Camarda, you can't say enough about what he did. One of the best punters in the country. If it wasn't for the punt god at San Diego State, he could have been a finalist for the Ray Guy Award. So you've got two guys. There's Brett Thorson, who the team brought in from Australia. Not a rugby-style guy, but an Australian. He's 28.
Other Aussie punter.
Aussie punter, yeah. Georgia's trying their hand at the Aussie punter. So you have him, and you have a guy named Noah Jones battling it out. Doesn't sound like they've both exactly been killing it so far in fall camp. So I'd expect that competition, honestly, to probably go up till the season opener and probably into the season, honestly, just because Kirby's always evaluating things. But those are the two guys that are kind of battling it out at punter.
All right. As we wrap up, you've named some of them already, but give me like a top 2 or 3 as far as breakthrough players. A couple of guys that nobody's heard of yet that could have big seasons.
Breakthrough players. I'm gonna go Branson Robinson at running back. I think he's going to second half of the season. Running backs start wearing down, getting dinged up. I think he's going to burst onto the scene in the second half of the season, have a big second half. I think Dumas Johnson at inside linebacker, he has a ton of talent. Team calls him Pop because he looks like an old man, but he's a very good looking guy in the last when we saw him. And then I think Malachi Starks. I mean, I really think if you want a freshman, that's the guy. Well, I guess Branson Robinson's a freshman too, but Malachi Starks is a guy that, Kirby, when Kirby's really hard on you in practice, that means he sees something in you, I think. And he's been hard on Malachi when we've been out there. And I think that means he knows the potential he has. And I think Kirby knows that he's a guy that very easily could see the field this fall.
All right. And then lastly, the schedule and Georgia's chances of repeating, which is just never easy. Another thing we talked about on the show last week, as all the great years that Alabama's had, and they don't repeat very often. So it's a very hard thing to do, but the schedule is not that bad because of the fact that no Alabama, no A&M, no Arkansas, no Ole Miss, no LSU, Oregon home/neutral, Florida neutral. The only top road games are South Carolina, Kentucky, and Mississippi State. So this is that doesn't mean that these games are easy, especially Oregon. You never know what's going to happen in the first game of the season. We saw what happened last year in the first game of the season because that was not it turned out to not be a very good Clemson team offensively. Mm-hmm. We kind of figured that out pretty early, but you didn't realize it. So you never know what's going to happen in that first game. But still, overall, not a bad schedule.
No, it's one of those things where, like, if you go game by game, it's like you don't pick a game to lose, but then you look at it from 10,000 feet, and it's like, well, picking a team to go undefeated again is pretty tough. I think if there is a loss, it's going to be in this three game stretch in November when you go Tennessee and Athens, in Starkville against Mississippi State, and then in Lexington against Kentucky, because Tennessee, the week before there's Florida and Jacksonville. I think Georgia has a big talent advantage on Florida. That's always an emotionally charged game. Tennessee's got Hendon Hooker, good offense. Things get weird in Starkville. Things stay weird in Starkville, I think. And then Kentucky is, Mark Stoops has done a great job with that program. Kentucky's always a physical team that'll give you a challenge. It's in Lexington. It'll be coldish probably. So I think if there is a loss, you probably got to look at those three. Now, if they get through those three, then, there's Georgia Tech, and, Georgia should beat Georgia Tech. And then you could be looking at the same scenario as last year where they're in the SEC championship at 12-0 against, let's assume it's Alabama in the SEC championship. And if Alabama's undefeated, then both teams could
play in the playoffs.
Get into the playoff, right, regardless of what happens. So, but yeah, if they can get through, I think, again, you look at individually at those teams, Georgia's got the talent advantage on those teams. They should win those games on paper.
Doesn't always work out that way.
Late in the season, injuries, things get weird. Georgia was number one and went into Auburn a few years ago and just got absolutely smoked and then beat Auburn a couple weeks later in the SEC championship. So you never know what can happen, but definitely this is a team that should be no worse than 11-1 and probably SEC East champions again.
Yeah, I look at it as even if they lose a game, they've got the SEC championship as the bailout. You win the SEC championship if you need it. You're in the playoffs anyway. So,
right.
And I don't see Georgia losing during the regular. So it's just
if they lose twice, something's gone
wrong.
Awry somewhere. Yeah,
unless they lose the opener. If somehow they lose the opener, then it's like, okay, guys, we can't lose the rest of the way, and that makes it a little bit more interesting.
Well, that's the crazy thing. Last year is like Georgia wins that opener against Clemson, and all of a sudden, like you said, you get a huge sigh of relief. It's like, okay, we can screw up and lose to Florida. Okay, we still win the SEC East, win the SEC championship. Great, we're done. But when you win that game, you win the rest of your games in the SEC championship. And listen, Georgia, they wanted to win the SEC championship. It hurt the team when they didn't, but it hurts a lot less knowing, okay, we're probably still going to get in the playoffs, and we're going to get another shot at those guys.
Absolutely. All right, Jed. So again, UGAsports.com. Check it out. Do you have your own show at all?
So on UGAsports.com, we do a live recruiting show every Monday night. It's called Rumors versus Facts. All the recruiting scoop and news and notes and all that you could ever want.
Okay.
I try to keep my face off the airwaves as much as I possibly can.
Okay.
So, but yeah, UGAsports.com, news, football news, recruiting news, cover UGA baseball and basketball if that's your thing. So that's the place to be for all your Georgia news.
Yeah. What's up with basketball team? So,
oof.
Not
Yikes,
good.
How much time you got?
Yeah, not good, huh?
Not good.
Who's the coach now?
Mike White. I got Mike White from Florida. So he's
interesting.
That's a good hire. It just kind of came out of left field a little bit, but I think he'll be a good hire. He'll get the program back to a respectable level.
Tournament level. Yeah.
Tournament level, yeah.
You got to make the tournament. When you don't make the tournament, things are wrong when you're an SEC team. So when
you win one SEC game, it's
not really bad.
Not a particularly good, especially with Atlanta right down the road. Like that's fertile recruiting territory, and that's not good.
Well, at least the fans had the football team. So
there you go.
Yeah, and I know that's probably first and foremost in their minds anyway. But it is what it is. Everybody has their own favorite sport. Again, appreciate it, Jed. We look forward to hopefully even talking to you during the season when something comes up, big game, big matchup, big story, things of that nature. And I appreciate you stopping by and helping us preview the season for Georgia.
Absolutely. Thanks, man. Anytime.